Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Good.
So let's wait.
Okay. Is it cold where you are?
Yeah, it became. In fact, we have some sort of storm. Not storm, but there's heavy rain. It was beautiful weather today, so it seems that it's over with Indian summer, to call it. So it's like cold, very rainy, streets full of rain, and yeah. Is there some climate? Is there some?
It's always sunny here.
Yeah.
Zdravo.
Hello, Vuk. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Vuk is okay. Since there are only few of us so far, maybe I could introduce the ones that we, the core team, like Melisa, Bronwyn, and myself, know. Vuk is a philosophy postgraduate, I think, and he's a regular member of our reading group that I probably mentioned when we were talking about Bronwyn's participation. So we did these reading groups like from last winter. Here is Jack. In fact, winter 2019 till today. In fact, we are doing reading groups with very different participants with so different backgrounds and so different interests that it's like, you know, it's like 10 perspectives, you know, for any topic that is there. So yeah, this is Vuk, and you all know Jack, I think, most of you.
I know you by name.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Really glad to be part of this. Excited to hear you talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's too bad you can't experience the space. I was there this summer, and I did this in person, a talk with Rex, and it was Nobush is an amazing host. In addition to being a great intellect, he's also has great hospitality. So.
Yeah, the great expectations. I'm afraid I'll be you know, obliged to meet them, but I'm happy, of course. So how are you, Jack? How did you manage to first of all travel from USA to England, from England here, from here back to USA with all checkups? Would you recommend it? I mean, it's late for Melisa and Bronwyn. They're coming.
We're coming. We're on our way next week.
Great. Yeah. I mean, it was smooth. It was so easy to, at least this summer. Yeah, I don't know what things are like there now. I mean, I'm back in the U.S. I'm in Philadelphia, so I don't know what traveling is like in Europe nowadays.
It's like Serbia is, as opposed to this summer when we were sort of like in some half-safe zone or something like that. Like we are like on I think we are among maybe not now anymore, but among 10 countries in the world with the most rapid infection rate. And our government managed to cover everything like in their pandemic policy, they managed to cover simply everything from like hurrying to get all possible vaccines and offer it for free, of course, to people, and then to measures that we witness now, which are like, you are on your own. We don't care. Go to the hospital. If they receive you, they probably will say it is a COVID crisis. We don't have enough space. And in the end, they just don't care anymore. They don't care. There are vaccines. If we go into a lockdown, it will be the endless game. So they covered everything from super strict responsibility and some sort of, let's say, oppression. If we see lockdown sometimes, or somebody sees it as oppression, from totally libertarian, like standpoint, you are responsible for your life, on your life and health. We offered you vaccine. That's it. So they're simply very hard to be confronted on that level. They managed to play all games, all possible games. So diagonalism governs, in Serbia when it is about pandemic. Okay. Well, I don't know if anybody else will appear. So I think that we could start if you're okay with that, Melissa.
Yeah, sure. I'm ready.
Okay. Now I will just say few words about project and about participation of, the criteria for participants. So we decided to address this issue after the experience that we had with a number of other issues that were very, symptomatic in different periods of existence of Cultural Center X. In 90s, it was, of course, the politics of Serbian government, Milosevic's rule. In 2000s, it was the problematic of transition in Eastern Europe, since Serbia entered the transition fully, in 2000. And since 2010, after the huge crisis of 2008, we simply started to question and challenge everything, since the coordinate system that we worked in that far and relied to simply started to disintegrate in front of our eyes. So everything had to be somehow readdressed, challenged in terms of understanding, defining, addressing. So this is how, in the end, after numerous topics like contemporary fascism, historical revisionism, activism in general, human rights, and their, outreach, especially to economic and social sphere, where this discourse was quite shy when it was about transition in Eastern Europe. So in the end, willingly or not, we just understood that phenomenon of conspiracy theories is like something that is on everyday agenda of whether mainstream media, whether alternative media of whichever orientation, and of course of social media, of media that became willy-nilly the main media of all alternative, or narratives that are not supported in, let's say, institutional frame controlled by or governed by the state, So in the end, it became place of freedom, but as Melissa's abstract hinted to, it became also a place, or some sort of unhappy, or very, very sad turnover to some sort of dark activity or something that is called or considered a dark activity, with many problems for ending contemporary societies and for addressing a number of issues that we are challenging. So our participants were recommended by consultants in Los Angeles and Belgrade, and our project team, which is not complete today, unfortunately. Our center is opening big documentary movie festival tonight, which somehow, because we work from home, we don't meet in our space, so we just don't have full communication scope as so I just didn't catch it somehow, you know. So they are all there now. I'm alone in our space with Jack also. So, for different reason, it was still pandemic measures. Jack also experienced. Anyway, I think that Melissa's participation is something that is very precious. Also, Bronwy's participation that we will, you know, get in that we will host, that we will have in from November 10 to November 20, because so far we really digged into theoretical experience, activist practices, in a way of understanding, addressing the background, to say theoretical, historical background of this phenomenon of conspiracy theories. But today, to our pleasure, we will see some specific perspective of, let's say, notions of whether it is independent media, is it participation, is it activity, dark or bright? What is disinformation? Why people spread it? Why it is so disturbing for us or for somebody else, and how this all in fact happened in the era that was seen as promising through participation, democracy, like subjectivization. We have it in Eastern European English. I don't know if it makes much sense in American English, like realization of individuals due to the capacity, possibility to be what in the media campaign rely to be media yourself. So we will hear that. Melisa is professor of journalism at California State University, Northridge. She has written 3 books, most recently Citizen Journalism, Practices, Propaganda, and Pedagogy, and dozens of chapters and articles on citizen journalism. She founded Pop-Up Newsroom, an international reporting project for journalism students, and has been a Fulbright scholar to Lebanon, an Open Society Fellow in Ukraine, and a Belgrade Institute for Internet Studies scholar. Her photographs were have been published by numerous news outlets and appear as a cover for the book Al-Kitab fi Talum. It's a shame that I didn't practice to spell this. Moral Panics, great topic for us today. And from ACT UP to the World Trade Organization, urban protest and community building in the era of globalization. So I can, in this few titles, recognize also experience of indie media, or let's say social media scene in Belgrade that is not very much present tonight, except of the Tamara Vucenovic that I have to greet, especially because she's a journalist from Radio Belgrade that follows this topic for years in her show called The Digital Icon. So we will record this presentation and debate, and we will have opportunity to debate its content and also during the stay of Melisa and Bronwyn in Belgrade from 10th to 20th November. Sorry for this long introduction. I'm notorious for like taking floor in seminars that last too long, but people say that is that is something that I can relate to. We will see. So, Melisa, thank you very much for accepting our invitation, for accepting also to get involved after so, let's say, tough debates that we had with Jack, with Professor Richard Wolf, that is not with us tonight. And yes, floor is yours. Please let us see what you prepared and what we have to think about unless we meet you here in Berlin.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank
Good. Thank you.
you, everybody.
Great. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming. My talk is going to be probably less theoretical and kind of as a segue into this artistic project that I'm working on with Bronwyn. So what I'm going to do is talk about participation, online digital participation, kind of starting with sort of a citizen journalism example, and then move that into conspiracy participation as well, as an example of what people are now calling a kind of the dark turn of digital participation. I'm going to cover 4 areas in this talk. The first will just be a brief history of grassroots online digital media participation and reporting news and information. And then the second thing I want to talk about is how that participation got co-opted by corporate media and corporate run social media platforms. And then also talk about the third part will be motivations to participate. And I think this idea of participation is one that is very applicable to conspiracy theories and what's happening that drives people to participate. And we can kind of predict some of that. And then finally, I want to end up with an introduction to the kind of artistic journalistic contribution to Unconspired that I'll be doing with Bronwyn, and that is the launching, and I'll describe it very briefly at the end, the Institute for Conspiracy Theory Analysis, and where the kind of the inspiration from that came from. So when I talk about participation, I'm talking about active involvement in an online digital sphere, producing information, disseminating that information, and in the ideal way that we wish it would be, helps ordinary people claim their space in the public sphere. So that's the participation part. There's a lot of histories of digital participation, but the one I'm going to talk about is just one history, a history, not the history. And I started in 1999 with the World Trade Organization protest in Seattle, Washington. These were massive protests, basically against the corporate entities that were setting the rules then that we now live under that would enhance global trade, with the making of money as the prime objective and less so considerations of other areas of life. It brought together, the protests were in November 1999. They brought together all kinds of different folks from representing different issues. The image here is actually labor movement. They were very involved, but there were other people that were very involved in this protest, environmentalists, particularly because it was in the northwest of the country. Communities of faith were there trying to get the so-called third world debt canceled. There were indigenous people. There's a lot of different interests were being represented there. All of them had concerns about the way that this organization was going to diminish democracy. It was going to take away labor rights by relocating jobs in places where they had fewer rights. It would take away environmental concerns by relocating businesses and production in places where they didn't have as many rules, and so forth and so on. So it was a diminishing of an ability to kind of put a check on those folks, on those entities. The part of it that I was particularly interested in was the media aspect of these demonstrations. And actually, this was the core of my doctoral dissertation, was looking at how they used media to organize the protests, which in 1999 meant looking primarily at email, because we didn't have all the things we have today. This is where and obviously some of you have been involved with indie media, or at least know about indie media. This is where indie media was born, or IMC, or Independent Media Center was born. to cover the protest, to give the protesters a voice in representing their concerns and covering their side of what was happening, and to kind of counter the mainstream corporate media. I specifically recall before the protest took place, going to this rented building downtown where indie media would be based, and there was hardly any furniture in there, and they wanted to give a presentation, show a video, and so we had to sit on the floor. And very common if you're an activist, this scenario, and they didn't have a screen. They had a sheet, a bed sheet, and they projected this video. They're trying to inspire people for what was to come. And it was a video about this guy who I'm sure you recognize, Subcomandante Marcos, and the Chiapas uprising against the NAFTA trade agreement between the US and Mexico, which ended up flooding our corporate agricultural flooded Mexico and drove people out of jobs. And they predicted that, and that's why there was an uprising. They were trying to stop that. At any rate, the other thing that Subcomandante Marcos actually talked about a bit was the media aspect of all of this. And that one of the things he did in this video was call for people to be their own media, to cover their own issues. And so that was a mantra that fueled indie media. This is what if you know indie media, this is what the website looked like pretty much all over the world. Sometimes they changed it slightly. But I point out in the lower left-hand corner, it says publish, instantly upload your video, text, and whatever. This seems super familiar to us today, but in 1999, this was kind of a very unusual, almost radical thing to ask people to do, to publish your own work on this site, to go out, you go get the information and you bring it back and you publish it on the internet. This was not a typical thing to be done. The intersection of IMC and participation, I just want to briefly touch on this. They did a lot of very interesting things. They were creative. This idea of people coming in and collectively producing this information and uploading it. And it was all going to be in this kind of center column of their site, and it was going to come in, whatever was at the top was what had just happened. That's very familiar to us now in terms of online news and online live blogging. We didn't have that form back then. They kind of invented some of these practices that have now become were adopted by other entities and become mainstream. They were subjective. They were part of the movement. They were members of these various social movements, and they saw themselves eventually as a social movement. They were non-commercial. The work was voluntary. Nobody was getting paid. I think one of the interesting things about IMC is a lot of activist media is very local, but they were very global. People from around the world participated in the production of the content initially. And then, of course, we all know eventually indie medias were formed all over the world. I think eventually 180 of them in 60 countries. Probably to me, one of the most important things was that they owned their own means of production in terms of they wrote the code for that website. They designed that website. They didn't go to some pre-existing template and make do with whatever was offered. There were no rules from some corporation about what could be posted or when or anything like that. So they were owning that aspect of it. Which of course is something that we've kind of lost in the changes. And they were collective, they were working together. I mean, there were individuals, but people were coming into that center and trying to do things as a group, as a collective. And eventually, as you know, all of you have worked with indie media, they went on and used a consensus process in the various nodes, and then there would be a global consensus process. So that was the model. That was what they saw as participation, all these different elements. When mainstream journalism got involved in this sort of participation, they saw it a bit differently. They too wanted you to upload, send us your video, go take a picture of the storm or the hurricane and upload it. And we'll put it on somewhere on our site maybe. And of course, you'll work for us, even though we're selling our product, you're not going to make any money generally off of it. Very rarely would you get paid initially. I think one of the best examples of kind of citizen journalism, participatory journalism was CNN iReport. And this was their outfit that it was set up. It was part of CNN, but it was separate. They had their own unit. They had a half a dozen or more people who were working on it, soliciting citizen content, asking people to post citizen content. They tried to post videos on training people on how do you go get this content and post it. They have said that one of the reasons they started it was they were actually trying to drive audiences to CNN, and they thought this was a way to do that. There was also a myth that, oh, if I post video to CNN iReport, I'm on CNN. And in fact, probably 3 to 5% of those videos and other content that was being posted ever made it onto the actual CNN broadcast. So it really wasn't taking your content and making it so much global. And I think this is what the news media organizations thought, is they were somehow going to collect this content and benefit from in some way, but not give up any control. And that was one of the problems with this corporate model. The other corporate model, of course, was the rise of the social media platforms, none of which existed in 1999. And then the image down in the lower corner here, that was Google's blogging software. Remember when everybody was going to go out and make a blog? So these social media platforms came along, and they're the ones who have eventually defined participation. Their definition of participation has become the one that we now use. And in particular, I think one of the aspects of it that's important is it was all about individuals. I mean, you could have a collective on Facebook or on Twitter, but it wasn't quite the same thing, because most of the participation going on was really about you and your account and you posting your individual thing onto their platform. And then they were setting the rules for what could be posted, what couldn't be posted. They were the ones making all the money off of it, which was quite different than obviously than indie media. So one of the things I want to talk about, because I think it is related to conspiracy theories, is why would anybody produce and share information and news online? We know from indie media, people were doing it because they wanted political change, they wanted social change. But it turned out, and I think when the news outlets first got involved, they also thought, oh, well, people want to participate in producing news. They want to participate in journalism. They want to share things and help contribute to democracy. But it turned out a lot of the research showed average person has no interest in participating in journalism or participating even in democracy. And that was a misreading of what people wanted to do online. Instead, the strong motivations turned out to be activism, people who did want to change, but there weren't that many activists. They were not the dominant group online. It turned out consumerism was a very big motivator, and in particular, these fan cultures, people who followed celebrities or followed television shows or movies or pop cultural products. They loved posting information and creating information and community around those products. And then the final motivation that's kind of one of the dominant ones is emotions, and especially the emotions that particularly inspire people to participate online are negative emotions: anger, hatred, fear. People are especially angry, especially like to be online and share their anger with people. I did want to mention that this one area of consumerist or fan participation or fandom area is an interesting one to think about in terms of conspiracy theories, because there's some qualities that seem to overlap. Consumerist participation, it's attached to pop culture. It's often a personal expression. You may be debating a character in a movie or a TV show, or waiting for a TV show to drop and then posting about it on Twitter, whether you like it or not, and having all this kind of interactions over it. But this kind of consumerist participation can also become political. Melissa Bruff and some other people have written a lot about this, that fan culture does sometimes become kind of political or civic. adopting these pop culture icons, whoever they are, characters or communities. If you think of K-pop, using those to actually participate in the political sphere as well as just sort of the entertainment world, if you will. Some researchers now are talking about participation instead as dark participation, that this is the main way people want to participate is through these sort of dark actions, kind of negative participation practices, that they're trolling and they're bullying people and harassing people. And that if you want to see where's the participation online, it's not people. So, I mean, yes, there are people trying to support democracy or do positive things, but a lot of it is this kind of misinformation, sharing things that'll tear other people down or harassing people, things like that. So I think that if we think of participation and conspiracy theories, that these are the models for what people are doing. It's because it may be activism. They're in some sort of group that wants to make some kind of social change. It may be they're seeing it almost like a, as we've said, it's like a game or participating in some pop culture thing with some hero over here doing things. They're driven by emotions. They may be afraid or angry. And then the other driver for some people's participation that I think is actually kind of interesting is to make money. So what we have this participation in conspiracy theories is people are participating very actively in these like the lower levels, sharing the information, distributing to other people, collecting information, acting on that information. And it's a peer-to-peer network. And First Draft is a group that looks at kind of one of the areas it looks at is misinformation and stopping misinformation. But if this is the model, if it's peer-driven and it's grassroots and it's networked, then this idea that we're going to get some fact checkers out there and they're going to fact check this, and then this misinformation that's coming out of these areas, we're going to stop it. That doesn't seem to be an effective way to do that. That's a top-down way to sort of look out and say, okay, well, here we just corrected whatever that thing is that you believe, so you're going to change what you believe. It doesn't match the form of participation and the motivations for participation. So it's not to say I'm against fact-checking. I just don't know that that's particularly going to be all that effective for the folks who are actually involved in spreading conspiracy theory information. And other people have written about conspiracy theory entrepreneurs, that people are marketing this either for ideological reasons or to gain power and attention. But a lot of it is people are just participating in it because maybe they think it's fun or interesting, and it's just kind of like following a team or following a show, except for you're following a conspiracy theory. And you can tell the story of whatever it is that the conspiracy is and share it with other people and feel like you're a part of something. But for some people and some organizations, obviously the motivation is to make money. We all know that tech companies exist to try to make as much money as possible, and it's finally gotten some attention that they don't care what it is people are sharing as long as they make money. They know that if it's something that involves emotions that makes people angry, that it's more likely to generate hits and follows and shares. And so the angrier and the more negative the information, the more money they make. I mean, some have come out and said, well, we didn't know this is what would happen, some of these tech people, but there's people who've written about going to Stanford and taking these psychological classes that were designed to teach you how to addict people and to control people and get them onto your side and stay on your side. So they've known all along. That's just simply not true, that they had no idea that they were doing this. So conspiracy theories are great money makers for social media companies, and they know it. There's just no denying it. The other aspect of making money and participating online is an interesting one to me, because for people who look at journalism and look at political things, we think that that's what participation online is, what's important and we need to look at. But in fact, many people, millions of people, the only participation they're doing online is buying and selling things, all these marketplaces. There's all these subcultures of people who go out and collect this tennis shoe is popular. They buy up all the tennis shoes and they put them on the Amazon marketplace or the toothpaste or whatever it is and sell it. This is a key area that I think the sphere of people who look at news, information, journalism, they don't look at this sphere as something that is participation, but it is participation. And I think it's important for an examination of conspiracy theories to understand that there's selling going on that is fueling some of this, or the kind of a same mindset of selling things. And now anybody can sell anything online through various, and these are major marketplaces, but there are also marketplaces, online marketplaces specific to different countries. This doesn't mean that selling conspiracy theories or merchandise related to it is new. It's been done for a long time, either through TV shows like X-Files or other books, or DVDs, videos, movies, things related to it that have been sold and generally linked to pop culture for a long time. It's just that now that it's online, it's happening, it's accelerating, and it's much more, I think, widespread. So there's a school of thought out there that conspiracy theories is intersecting with this idea of I'm going to sell you something, that it's a way to make money. Of course, the key person making a whole boatload of money off of conspiracy theories is Alex Jones. The number here is 20 million in revenues is 2014. We don't really know how much money he's made because it's a private business. And this information only available because he got a divorce and it came out on the court documents. But he was making a boatload of money and spending it on all kinds of crazy things, like, $50,000 in guns. I don't even know what kind of guns you'd be buying with that amount of money, but it had to be a lot. So he's made a whole bunch of money in the world of conspiracy theories. And people, we look at the bad political and social impact of what he's done, but the money part of it is a key motivator. The other part of this is it's not that he's making the money off of the show so much as he's making money off of stuff that he sells on his website. And the stuff that he sells on the website is often related to whatever conspiracy he's promoting at that particular time. If the world's going to end, soon, they're going to come grab your guns or grab you or whatever. Well, you better be ready. Why don't you buy the survivalist food bucket, and then you'll be able to last a couple of days on those peanuts, I guess. We can think of this Alex Jones model as sort of a 21st century medicine show. The medicine shows, as you know, were 1800s, mid to late 1800s. And they went around and they had the cowboys and Native Americans and they performed and whatever. But part of what the medicine shows were doing, they were selling that patent medicines, which were themselves fake and were just alcohol if they had even that in them. But those medicine shows existed, the performance existed to sell the product. And so what this is just a 21st century version of that. So they sell all these things, and this is even a branded male vitality product, InfoWars Life. So lots of money are being made off of these things that they sell. There's also a project out of Europe, multiple universities participated in, called the Infodemic project. It's quite a great website. I recommend it. One of the things they talked about is conspiracy theory as a gig or a side hustle for these, not the Alex Jones, but a different tier of people who are on YouTube and other social media sites selling their own version of the conspiracy theory or some other conspiracy theory. They're not going to make as much money as him. They're not millionaires, but they're making some money. And so it's a job for them. It may not be their main job. And the way they make money, again, is this kind of, you lure people in and then say, well, if you really want to find out the other details of this, you're going to have to subscribe, or you might have to buy the DVD, or you're going to get into it somehow through this other additional activity. So other people are also making money off of conspiracy theories as a side hustle. And then I wanted to just talk briefly about the two top selling conspiracies in the last couple of years, at least one in the US and one worldwide, and that's QAnon and the COVID cures. QAnon, and I kind of group it, and perhaps incorrectly, but with Stop the Steal, because I think some of that overlaps with the election of 2020. these involve celebrity entrepreneurs who are selling some of this. And part of what the selling going on here is, if you're a politician in the US, you can sell these conspiracies, promote the conspiracies and get political donations. And because it's not very well regulated, that money can be spent in any number of different ways. So the conspiracy is used to raise money. You promote it, and then you get political donations, and then you start getting more and more money that way. Now, is the money there to make them more powerful or stay in public office? Probably, but they're also benefiting from it financially. I think that you can think of this as participatory fandom too, by those who are kind of followers and the fans of the conspiracy theory, so they can kind of stay in touch with it. They can buy these pieces of merchandise, a hat or whatever. And that's one of the ways they're connected. So it's not that everybody who follows a conspiracy is making money. Most people are not making money, but they're acting as fans in the same way that a celebrity has a bunch of fans that helps them stay in the public eye. Well, these people are helping these conspiracy theories stay in the public eye. There are people selling lots of stuff, and we don't know, are they following a conspiracy theory? Some of them probably are. Or they just people want to make money. So it's all this t-shirts and bumper stickers and hats and things like this. Those horns that the QAnon shaman wore at the insurrection apparently are a hot item now, or have been. These are sold online. They're sold at protest. There's even been attempts to patent or trademark the QAnon with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I don't think they've been successful. So somebody wanted to just make some money. Hey, if I can trademark this, then everybody will have to pay me whoever uses it. So it's just about people some of whom are trying to make money. Maybe they're true believers, and maybe they're just hucksters. And at least some researchers saying that participatory communication is at the core of QAnon. They drop information, pieces of information about the conspiracy, and the people pick it up, and then they try to follow it and uncover it, and maybe add to their own information to it. I know that apparently JFK Jr. this past week was supposed to have shown up in Dallas and did not make his appearance. So it's just constantly dropping these new bits and pieces of information, almost like playing a game or following a celebrity. The infodemic folks talked about what's happening because the conspiracy theories are being blocked now. Some of the most prominent people purveying them on social media platforms, that what's happening is they're looking for lookarounds. And so if you're on, say, Amazon or somewhere, you get into like an item that's not being blocked, and you start making your review, and in the review you start promoting the conspiracy theory in the review as a way to kind of get that information out there. And I think the conspiracy theories benefit a great deal from memes and viral cultures, partly because of this sort of pop culture element to them, where they're kind of a game and they're kind of exciting for people. The other major conspiracy theory is that there's all these cures for COVID that are being hawked around the world. This professor at Berkeley says it's a complete disinformation industry, and people at the top are making money, and then the people below are actually, they believe that these things are cures. They believe the information. This is just an example of kind of this thinking about it as a top and lower level. So this is a person, a family at a lower level in Florida, of course, Florida, who created a church called Genesis 2 Church of Healing. And they packaged up these potions that are actually industrial bleach once they're mixed with water, and then marketed that to people. Here, buy this for your COVID cure or whatever. They did get indicted. I don't know if they've actually are going to get sent to jail or not. So the marketing of these products based off of these conspiracy theories can happen at any level. And they can happen anywhere. So a group called Happy Science that's Tokyo-based but is global. It's kind of like Scientology, and they got onto the COVID cures as well. Their cures are, you watch our DVD, and the church leader, if you hear his voice, it'll help cure it. Or, you can also pay additional money and get a blessing from the leader or some surrogate of the leader at a temple. And once you get that blessing, then you won't get COVID either. So for $400, or maybe I guess you might get it, but not get so sick with a $100 one. And then it's the other thing about the world leaders benefiting from conspiracy theories in the US, of course, we constantly think of Trump, but it's other world leaders have also promoted cures for COVID. This is the president of Madagascar. There's a major agricultural industry on this plant, Artemisia. So they want people to buy this plant and put this plant into different products. So they made a tea out of it. And they said, well, this tea can, help you protect you from COVID. It'll help treat symptoms or whatever. And so it's a global kind of phenomenon of marketing all these things related to these conspiracy theories that people are trying to benefit from. So to kind of circle back to IMC, if you think about these modes of participation, there are some similarities with what we first thought the participation would be like if you take the IMC as your example. But there's some differences. And I think one of the differences in that, I'll list this one first, is IMC was not so much based on some leader coming out and endorsing your idea, and then everybody would jump on the bandwagon. It was much more grassroots, much more devolved than that. But the conspiracy theorists and the people kind of selling them also exhibit a lot of creativity in what they're doing. I mean, if you can get somebody to pay you $400 for a blessing, I think that's a pretty creative way to market a conspiracy, or at least a fraudulent product. Like the IMC, they were subjective, they're voluntary labor. So many of the people are promoting the ideas for free. They're not being paid. One of the key differences, of course, is I don't think the conspiracy theories have a consensus process the way IMC members did. It appears that some people like Trump who promote conspiracy theories, are trying to build their own infrastructure, build their own social media platforms, but their model appears to still be corporate, and they haven't had much luck with that so far. And so this is kind of want to end up with this, and I want to then just talk a little bit about the Institute. Is this idea that this academic asks is, well, if we're all talking about conspiracy theories, then aren't we all selling them? If I'm giving you a talk about conspiracy theories, am I not just selling them too? Are we all just selling them to everybody? I don't know. So our intervention is the creation of the Institute, founding of the Institute for Conspiracy Theory Analysis. And I want to talk about the inspiration for this institute. And this is what I'm doing with Bronwyn Malden. And she's going to talk more about the artistic elements of it when we get to Belgrade. Inspiration for our institute comes from the 1930s, an institute called the Institute for Propaganda Analysis. And if you've studied mass comm in the US, this was for decades has been in kind of intro to mass comm books. As a very, very famous project. It was initiated by professors, academics, educators, and journalists at Columbia in the 1930s. A journalist named Clyde Miller was kind of the key member. And the initial funding was from the department store, Scion, Filene's department store, gave them their initial money. They were worried, in the 1930s, they were worried about propaganda from the Nazis. And they thought something needed to be done to protect people, to inoculate people against propaganda. They're exceptionally well known for developing materials that were understandable to regular people. And the 7 techniques of propaganda analysis, which they came up with, are very famous. You may have heard of some of them. In fact, it's widely been distributed. They produced leaflets and bulletins. They funded books and other research. And their main audience was teachers and students. They wanted to produce information to help them become literate in what is propaganda so that they could guard against it. These ideas became less popular in the 1940s because the US got heavily involved. And in fact, some of the people involved in this organization were involved with the US government producing propaganda against the Nazis, the Axis powers, and propagandizing Americans to try to get them to support the war effort. So asking people to think critically about the media system and the way it could manipulate you became very unpopular with certain powers that be. And so this kind of damaged the Institute for Propaganda Analysis in terms of turning people against that. The other thing that this institute had been doing a bit, not a lot of, but a bit of, was talking about segregation. So again, talking about race is also not a, especially in 1940s, was not a popular topic, and apparently is not a, still a controversial topic in our country today. For these reasons, and I had only recently discovered this part of their history, the House Committee on Un-American Activities, which sole mission was to find all the communists and socialists who were working in Hollywood and the cultural industries and in politics, and expose them and make America safe from their ideologies. They took an interest in the Institute for Propaganda Analysis and started trying to bring them into that sphere of questioning. And so to me, it's kind of an irony that this institute, which is very much inspired the founding of our Institute for Conspiracy Theory Analysis, was itself a victim of a conspiracy theory, which is the conspiracy theory that these communists were going to take over America, that this governmental committee had perpetrated. And that is my talk. Questions, comments?
Yes, of course. I will offer to anybody from audience feeling invited to comment or ask.
Sure, if I can. I mean, only because also I might have to leave pretty soon because it's the middle of the workday here. I really liked your talk, honestly. That was just like so much to think about and to chew on, and the way you implicate those histories, both of corporate journalism, citizen and activist journalism and media, and then what that's sort of become and how this sort of thing has spawned a kind of conspiracy world. It's just great. It's very rich and so much in there. So I just want to just bounce off some things and thinking about things you've already said, but I kind of want to just maybe hear more about one of the things I'm trying to say, which I'll just jump right in with what I really liked. You mentioned things like QAnon, and I'm going to try to avoid the conspiracy designation. I mean, I think QAnon is actually closer to indie media as a kind of media-based social movement, is what I think of it as. That has a number of narratives and maybe some conspiracy theories, but it's actually rooted in, as you mentioned, certainly non-consensus-based practices. So that to me is like, it impacts how we think of peer-to-peer, right? What is a peer? I think the kind of horizontalism and the ethos that infused IMC and the kind of movements that were forming in that moment had this idea that of what peers were a kind of like an attempt to create horizontal networks that were then also trying to mimic or understand internet networks as possibilities. QAnon, I see the peer is the peer that's also part of a certain kind of marketing that I think adds a little something to this too, is multi-level marketing, which I think is the kind of historical base, both religious and secular, that informs entrepreneurship, right? And certainly a digital version of entrepreneurship that we've seen today with Lula Rich and other kinds of that documentary about different multi-level marketing things that are rooted often in religious schemes as well. And so what I think is fascinating is to see almost like at least one thing is how do we think of what a peer subject is, who a peer is, when one is certainly based on a very hierarchical system of of spirituality, for instance, right? And that kind of infuses, I think, the kinds of versions of peer-to-peer, even digital networking that can happen. So people are more likely to follow either a kind of prophetic figure like an Alex Jones, or even the minor prophets that we see with QAnon. So I think that, I mean, I just thought that was an interesting thing that you kind of evinced a little bit when you mentioned the non-consensus based models. And I think that's actually tied to how they think of networks or even the digital sphere.
Yeah, I've been talking with Bronwyn about the multi-level marketing model as being, that's absolutely what this is. And one of the things I don't know about multi-level marketing, although obviously the Tokyo example suggests that it's global, and I don't know much about it in other places. I'd actually kind of like to know more of, is it particularly American, or is it coming from somewhere else? But if you're suggesting it's kind of similar to a religious model, then it should be everywhere, I would think. It's interesting to think about the relationship between the leaders and because of indie media not really having the leaders, what is the relationship of the leaders? And I do think one of the things, I think it was on one of the slides, and now I can't remember who it was from, one of the things they talked about, and this was something I've heard about when I was in Ukraine, is that sometimes the beginning of these misinformation, conspiracies, or whatever, we don't know it's from some kind of unknown, maybe lower level person, and then it gets somebody big, the prophetic figure taps into it, and then suddenly it gets spread that way. I'm actually kind of interested in that, and when I was in Ukraine, this is what they talked about, was you actually have to get to the source. It's too late if it's already been put out by the bigger figure, if you want to find out where it's actually coming from. Peer-to-peer, yeah, I don't know a lot about the relationships between people and QAnon and what I mean, I haven't been to any of their events. I don't know a whole lot about how they interact with each other. But yeah, it's clearly could be viewed as a social movement. It just happens to have a different aim and a different structure. And for me, like I've said, I've been so immersed in sort of journalism and you know, it's one of the failings of people who look at alternative media is they always want to look at the things that support what they believe in. And we don't really want to go look at the things we don't believe in, so we don't understand them very well. So I can't say that I can see similarities. It's like, oh, if you look at it, yeah, there's this and this and this, they seem to be the same, but I'm not entirely sure how they work. That hasn't been something that I've looked at, and you're certainly much more knowledgeable about that. But the problem is the people who, it doesn't seem like there's an overlap between people interested in the alternative progressive things and people who are interested in this. I don't know that they work together and they're in kind of analyzing things as much as we should.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
Thank you. Some other question or comment?
Yeah, I had like a small question,
Okay.
and a small comment. The way I see it is that this conspiracy theory is the other, how would I put it? The other face or the other side of a certain mainstream media propaganda that exists. So it should be read as a response to that. And I'm neither for conspiracy theories nor for so-called mainstream media. I'm for good quality journalism that does its research. So my question is, what has happened to the standards of journalism? So that's what I see as a problem. What has happened to the standards of journalism in the mainstream, so that these kind of independent sites started to appear, where one can get, I don't know, miracle COVID cures or whatever. So the way I see it, it's like on the one hand, there's like all this misinformation, but there's also this misinformation coming from mainstream media, like people, like the vaccines, for example. I'm not a vaccine skeptic, but the simple fact is that the COVID-19 vaccines were put out in the third phase of the clinical trial. You have to have 5 phases. So, and a lot of doctors, a lot of independent journalists of quality talked about that. And this is not a conspiracy theory. This is not a conspiracy theory. So my question is, what has happened to the mainstream media and to the standards and qualities of mainstream media so that certain conspiracy theories start to appear? That's my question.
Well, I think the problems with mainstream media, they're not new. They've existed for a long time, and which is corporate ownership. The model, they've never been able to adapt their model to changing ways of funding. So now in the US, all the little small local newspapers, many of them are gone now. And they can track that when they go, then people start relying on less reputable sources. Reliance on elite sources, politics presented from this insider point of view. So normal people ordinary people aren't really interested or following it. All of these problems have long existed. There's nothing like suddenly mainstream media had a problem. They've had problems all along. They are increasingly, though, as other outlets disappear, those little local newspapers mattered because they were ordinary local people worked on them. And the people who work at the New York Times and the Washington Post, which are now the main print level, online news form of print and newspapers, those people are very elite. They're in a very limited circle of people went to the same schools, and they see the world the same way. They're making the same amount of money. So it's not these little local guys or people who know what's happening in a small town in Iowa or whatever. So there's a bunch of things happening to do with economics. The other part of it is these companies have bought up even the large scale newspapers and are driving them into the ground where they don't actually cover anything. They don't have enough people to cover anything. And they're all they do is exist to make this holding company, this company that's bought them strictly just to get the money. They don't care what happens in them or whether they're a quality product or not. So it's the financial collapse, I think, is one of the key things that's happened. And without enough people, with a willingness to stand up to power, to be able to stop being manipulated, the fewer reporters you have, the more likely you're just going to accept whatever press release comes along, or you're not going to be able to ask enough questions because there's nobody to go send out to ask the questions. So the system is in many ways in collapse. I mean, there's some small initiatives all around the country that are exciting and interesting, but I don't know that they're strong enough or big enough to really stand up to the corporate power. I also think that mainstream media, a couple of things to do specifically with reporting when you talk about vaccines is the reporting of science. Science is difficult. It's so complicated now. People aren't trained to report on it. Most people aren't. They don't really understand the scientific process. They don't understand that science changes, that you try some drug out and here it works now, and then later it turns out we find out it's not so effective, that's part of the process. They don't ever explain that. They just make things very simplified, and they themselves don't understand science. I mean, it's the same thing of the companies who produce the medicines are not necessarily going to reveal their weaknesses to people. So you just have a system where it's not set up to report on science, and people can't follow it. They don't have the education to follow it, and they don't really want to follow. They just want to know, tell me yes, no, black, white. There's not an audience for nuance. Mainstream media is also, we're talking about making money. They're covering conspiracy theories because it gens up hits. People want to read that. If you go to any of their sites and you type in conspiracy theory, some of them have special pages or whatever, special tags dedicated to it, because it's a moneymaker. And so they end up perpetrating the thing that they don't actually say they don't like. And I'm not sure if that answered your question, but thank you. Tamara?
Yeah. Izvoli, Tamara.
Hvala. Thank you. Thank you, Nebojša, for bringing Melisa to us, really. Thanks a lot for this opportunity. And thank you, Melisa, for the great presentation and so many information. I have a lot of questions, but I will wait until you come to visit us in Belgrade. My question is, the key question is, what's going to happen next? Because you were talking about 80s, 90s, we're talking now about these days. But when we are talking about disinformation industry, what's going to happen next, in your opinion, and what we can do? You mentioned in my opinion, the keyword education. When we are talking about mainstream media, the problem is, sometimes I ask my students or my colleagues or my friends, okay, why do you share this story on the Facebook? Have you checked it? And they sometimes, not sometimes, almost always answer something like, yes, but it's my friend, he shared that, so I think that's true. There is no place for doubt. So in many times I ask them, okay, have you heard about something that is called source literacy? And they even don't know what does that mean. And when I ask, how can you, because for me it's a question of ethic, how can you share those misinformation? And they sometimes said, okay, but I really believe it's true. And then I ask again, but have you tried to check that story? And they almost always answer no. So my question for you, two questions. What we can do to change this situation as you described it perfectly, and what's next? What do you see as the biggest challenge?
Well, I think that you mentioned media literacy, and that we kind of have to have that. I don't know, that seems to be one of the tools, and this is kind of what this institute we're trying to do, is actually create very accessible kind of interventions where, and I've tested them a little bit, I've still got to work on it, but there's some of them are up on students to see, hey, does this work? How effective is this? We did kind of start to think a little bit differently about media literacy in recent years, because there's a balance. And we've now realized it's not just, oh, we're going to think critically and skeptically about the media, because sometimes that is what leads to people to either don't believe in anything, or that leads them to think maybe a conspiracy theory is right. So it's kind of like you can have so much media literacy, but if you get, it can go off in the wrong direction. This, because I think conspiracy theories are coming from a sort of skepticism of what's going on, and asking questions, and why are things like this? And so if we're training students in media literacy, or in kind of looking at things critically, is how do you get that balance, that it's not going to go off into I don't believe in anything, or off into kind of I believe all this stuff that can't possibly be true because I was told to be critical. I think that's an issue. For the future, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know that this is going to kind of disappear and people aren't going to be attracted to misinformation. I'm more concerned about large powerful entities producing misinformation, and how are we going to keep a check on them? The peer-to-peer question that Jack brought up is, I think, a somewhat of a different kind of question of people spreading, and as you're describing, individuals spreading information, misinformation. My concern is, if we think of these ideas now, is what's going to happen when we have all this AI, when we have VR. It's always been a concern. If you've ever been inside some of those high-end VR environments, the ability to manipulate people will become much greater the further into the technological versions of reality that we're exposed to. I think it's going to become even more complicated, and I don't know what the answer to that is. I wish I did.
Thank you so much.
We will all escape to Meta Facebook. We just reconstructed the behavior of a government in Kingdom of Yugoslavia that ran away when occupation forces came. So somebody said what Facebook leadership is planning is in fact running away from the world that they destroyed. Right, in this meta universe that they are planning to create, you know. Anyway, I would just maybe offer one maybe interesting insight that somehow combines Jack's reference to like more prominent development of conspiracy theory phenomenon since mid-90s. I mean, exactly, it is related to Oklahoma bombing, but there are many other also like trends that somehow placed this the rise, the like a prominent rise of the phenomenon, because they existed always, conspiracy theory narratives or beliefs, etc. And then Professor Wolf mentioned that in the last 25 years, exactly, I mean, the income in the United States not only stagnated, the average income, it decreased. It gradually decreases. And the discontent of a broad population is bigger and bigger. Somehow, when I think that when we put these two, let's say, historical reflections together, we can see that more and more people do not trust the system, the very system. You know, it doesn't matter if it is presented in media in this or another way. It's just mistrust. And now, as we are reading together these scientific works now in some sort of scattered reading groups, we see that most of the scientists are in fact very, how to say, skeptical, now skepticism, skeptical about the very understanding of the phenomenon, not only in mainstream media, but in activist sphere, for example. Because what we are concerned with and what we react to is this, what Tamara explained, like somebody that we know is sharing very problematic content, and then we address them. But we don't somehow think of this loss of a trust in institution, in the body of knowledge that is supported by the institutions and supports internal institutional setting. And I think that what was discovered in recent and what we have to deal with, whatever comes next, you know, is that many people that in this or another way participate, share content, maybe buy some souvenir, or, you know, say something, you know, loud somewhere in a public space. Some researchers from Germany think most of the people do not believe that. Now we have the next phenomenon, the cynicism of ideological interpellation, like participating in system without believing in it. So I think that we are having more and more complex tasks to see how this mechanism works, because it appears that conspiracy theory narratives or beliefs, or to say, let's say, enterprises, to say, they're just a symptom. They're not the core problem. They're how to say, this is the outreach of the problem towards media sphere, towards let's say popular discourse, etc., etc. But problem is somewhere else, you know. And there are so many examples in these works that we are translating and retelling now. We are copying the trend amongst young people. They do not read classical literature anymore. You have War and Peace by Tolstoy in 2 pages. You know, it is retold and that's it. So we are now adopting and we are retelling scientific papers. You know. But it is like, so the basic of economical, let's say, turnover from, especially in the United States, from a capitalist society that could meet expectations, needs, basic needs, also some sort of prosperous future, at least to majority of population. That it is not the fact anymore, according to his analysis. It is not the situation anymore. Of course, that people will lose trust in institutions, etc. Now, what is there to replace it? Conspiracy theory, yes. But it is just a sign, as most of researchers say, this is just a sign of resistance at any price. So the most terrible the narrative appears, it brings some sort of a satisfaction in rejecting the official system that in fact rejects that people. I don't know if I'm clear enough, but for me, this complexity is something to really engage one institute with. So anyway, the question would be, do you think that people that participate in whichever aspect of proliferation, promoting, really believe in these narratives? Or it is some sort of scary story that has to give them visibility, to give them some sort of agency, to give them some sort of, I mean, recognition, whatever. Just you know, provocation, in fact. Do they participate just in provocation, or they really believe that there are lizard people or something? This is so interesting. You know, I'm not sure what is the real situation there.
Well, I think some things are believed, but there is, I think, ritual. It's a ritual participation. People want to belong to something, and this kind of alienation that they have from classical institutions. That you be. I mean, some of the things I've read about Trump supporters, as they said, they were older folks who said, I didn't have any meaning in my life, and now I can go and follow and go to the rallies, and it gives me somewhere to go, and I've met people, and we do things together and things like that. So there's a lot of people who feel like they're not connected. I think it's a huge problem that people don't feel connected. And I don't know that a lot of the more crazy things, I think it's a pop culture thing. It's like you're following some TV show because it's fun to kind of speculate on whatever about the characters in the TV show or whatever. I think there is a kind of ritual part of it in the participation. I do think that you can have a lot of this grassroots and people sharing and they're doing their own thing, but that these groups, whatever it is, people believe that there are other entities who want to control those, manipulate them, and to inject their ideas into those groups. That is the goal. So it's not just peer-to-peer people talking. There are other outside forces who would like to manipulate them for whatever, for political gain or whatever, financial gain or whatever. So I think it's this kind of multiple levels of motivation that are and actions that make it more complicated.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comment on the question? If not, I would just mention one. Oh, is there?
I think
something that I
Jack
see?
was going to say something.
Oh,
Sure.
please, Jack.
Something. I'll say some things. It was about the Columbia School, right? It just reminded me just how fascinating that moment is in like journalism, media, communication history, where you have Lazarsfeld, you have Adorno, you have them trying to work on some things around the same topics, but then they break. But what it reminded me of also, and I was just trying to see if this project was affiliated with Columbia, and I can't remember who sponsored this, right? This is the Prophets of Deceit, which is the Lowenthal, I can't remember who the co-author is. So Leo Lowenthal was part of the Frankfurt School, was also, I think they were in the States somewhere, and Norbert Guterman, right? So it's the lesser known of these. So people know about the authoritarian personality and Adorno's work on that. But this one, it's about the American agitator, and they're looking at radio personalities and the rhetorical devices and the ways they are part of this burgeoning new media system called radio, right? And their efforts at at stoking and really kind of like inspiring right wing, even fascist sentiments in the U.S. So they're studying fascism and radio in that way, and I just think it has. I would just throw it out there as something that I think has, important kind of could be repurposed for this understanding of influencers and the way that as you said, like there aren't just. It's not a horizontal system. It's not peer to peer. There are all these levels and different kinds of actors and entrepreneurs who show up and for either ideological and or financial reasons want to be part of this really interesting new market / game / pop culture phenomenon / social movement. But the way that this layer works of a kind of agitator or influencer, I think is really something that's embedded in at least U.S. media history. In those moments, again, it's like, I think one of the things, sorry, I can say this again, one of the things I think what I really liked about this presentation and your work is like, you're showing what kind of experiments are possible in the early days of a medium, right? So, and the way that journalism is sort of dealing with that too. So IMCs in '99, this is an important moment, right? And so to see that now in the ways that the experiments that are happening now in this post Web 2.0, post social media moment, I think is fascinating. So I don't know. I just wanted to throw out the Columbia connection because I always find that also that period interesting. The fact that your institute is kind of also being drawn from that, I think, is really great.
Well, thank you. Those are the great insights. The institute did sponsor, the study. Oh God, I'm gonna forget the name of it. It was the Alfred McClung Lee on propaganda, where they studied Father McLaughlin's speeches.
Yeah.
They funded that. So yeah, there's connections between these kind of religion and the multi-levels, I think, is one that we probably should think about with the institute developing something on that, I think. That's great. Thank you for mentioning that.
Okay. Some more comments or questions? If not, I would just refer to one detail from I think that is an introduction to a book, Conspiracy Theories and the Study of Alternative and Emergent Religions by David G. Robertson, who was the guest editor. And he emphasizes something that he calls parallelism. No, he quotes author Asbjørn Direndal that draws out the parallel ways in which knowledge, history, and agency are constructed in these two discourses. I mean, two discourses are religion, to say, and conspiracism, to say, conspirationist. So I think that we have to be very cautious when what we do here, what I do, I mean. I just underestimated the phenomenon. I said, this is nothing, this makes no any sense. And then when we finally realized how you stable the ground on which phenomenon constantly renovates itself, how stable this foundation is. There is maybe this parallel structure that somehow imitates the powerful structures that are already there in understanding the world, in contemplating the problems of this world. We have some bigger problem to address than just their let's say superficial outlook, because in outlook they're really most of what we see as conspiracy theory. We made this research amongst the activists in the region, and no one questioned the term, which we did like from Jack's participation. We questioned how the term itself is relevant or not. No one questioned the term, but everybody talked and addressed the conspiracy theories that are obviously, to say, not only uncheckable, but totally, bizarre in their appearance and very toxic and fascistoid, etc., etc. So I don't know. I just wanted to when you were talking about at one of the slides, there were some 4 features of drive for participation in conspiracy theory discourse. One of the slides, but when I because of this parallelism emphasis, I just understood that these 4 motivations or 4 reasons can stay for a leftist activism as well. There's no much difference, if at all. So I think that we will have to I don't know. If we here in Rex in this project manage to continue to deal with, but yeah. I think that that this how to say mimicking the structure of knowledge, official knowledge, whatever it is, like real science, as I like to say. This is not real science. This is pseudoscience. The mimicking of even to say factography, because they offer some facts. They bomb with they say that science is corrupted, that it cannot prove anything. But then when it's one scientist that confirms their standpoint, they bring him forward. They say all of a sudden that scientist is a valid one. Anyway, I just thought of this parallelism and remember from this work, and I don't know what would be the let's say the telling difference between motivation of somebody that in this case really believes sincerely that, I don't know, pandemic is a setup, sincerely believes and has these reports of World Health Organization that maybe it is from laboratory, maybe it is not, maybe it was this. And what is difference between activism, let's say in some of conspiracy theory frames of such a person, and somebody that is, attacking them, that they're mystifying, that they are, that they are conspiracionists, and that they are in fact damaging the public debate. What is difference between their motivations, not between their argumentations, just motivations?
Well, do those motivations hold up? Does there have to be additional ones? Yeah, maybe, I don't know. But I think you could argue that a lot of the motivation, and I don't want to, gosh, I'm sure I'm going to say what I'm going to say next, but a lot of the motivation is this fan culture, this fandom, participating in this phenomenon as a fan of the thing, and it's a game. Whether we can, want to say that is also what religion is that you're just a fan of Jesus and you're participating in that. I don't know.
in fact, in case of pandemic, they are both concerned about the, let's say, outcome, to say about also about the actual state of affairs, who is endangered by lockdown, who is not, etc., etc. But
well, but what is but if you try to say what's motivating the participation, it's fear. Then if you're worried about having a lockdown or not having a lockdown, then your motivation is fear. And so it's, I think if you keep it broad enough, it can explain multiple motivations, whether they're motivations we agree with or understand or don't entirely know why people feel that way. I think it still helps to kind of explain it.
Yeah, exactly.
Bronwyn, did you have a comment?
Who? I don't see the hand. Anyone? Who wanted to comment? I didn't maybe notice.
I don't think anybody does.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, my neighbor in suburb, when I live from time to time, that like totally rejects vaccination, and after 10 months of debate or so, in the end, he gave me the answer, like why people do not get vaccinated, and he gave me the answer that you just gave. We are afraid. It's fear. No explanation where fear comes from, how it is justified or not. It's fear, and that's it. Yeah.
Yes. Oh.
Just, I wanted to like offer, like, if I can say, like a personal other perspective, there are cases, for example, and there are well-documented cases, for example, in Israel, you can look what happened in Israel, where vaccines had side effects, really serious side effects for people. Certain countries didn't institute lockdown or the wearing of the masks. I just want to give another perspective. And if I can give a personal story, my mother, after receiving the vaccine from the company called Pfizer, had a rare ailment of the skin. But in order to prove that she has this and that this is caused by the vaccine, you need a lot of money. You need a lot of money just in order to run the test to prove that it is caused by the vaccine. So like I just want to say that maybe and I have COVID right now, basically. I just also want to say that. And I have a serious case of COVID. And I just want to offer like a different perspective. Like maybe things are not so, like certain vaccines were pulled off the market for a lot less than what's happening to, and I'm not against vaccines. I'm like, so a vaccine should be made, but like the problem with these vaccines is that they were released in early states of clinical trials. And this is like, I think it's serious in a way. It's serious to those companies, and nobody is like, it's not that nobody is reporting it. There are reputable journalists and scientists who are reporting about it. I just want to offer another perspective on things.
Thank you, Vuk. Sorry to hear that you are infected. What to say? Yes, I mean, when, for example, my friends and relatives as well, that they don't want to be vaccinated, when they offer such arguments that you just mentioned, that vaccines went into distribution before some, let's say, regular or expected or popularly understood process and period of trial, of checking the possible side effects. I have to say that I received AstraZeneca. I mean, that was offered to me. And I panic now. I have a fear that I have a small thumb in my leg. I mean, I'm smiling, but it's not funny at all. But I mean, also the fact is that such a massive usage of vaccines, and they were tried on, let's say, medical staff in the beginning, volunteers, etc. So yes, vaccines are being trialed, but trialed. Not trialed, tried in regular terms when there's no instant massive need. Yes, there is time, there is specific procedure, but now the numbers of people that received it were much more relevant to say much more relevant, let's say, body of experiments, to say, and the results are in fact like for any other vaccine. There are always vaccines that have bad side effects. Maybe I have that side effect that is connected to AstraZeneca. So just to say that I'm not I'm interested in understanding that. Yes, but yes, there was no time. People in this work, in this very works that we read now, people openly say they're scientists, you know, I mean, that are critical towards the phenomenon. But they say, I mean, people are, you know, they have right to question the motivations of pharmaceutical companies. Totally, they're totally right. They're totally right not to believe the system that, you know, frightens them for years, for decades, that there is some, let's say, for example, we were discussing fake news stigma, like whether I think that Trump really brought it to like popular usage. But for example, all presidents in last, let's say, 30, 40 years, all presidential candidates in United States were promising that they will bring manufacture, which means factory production, back to USA. And not a single one fulfilled the promise. Even more, it is impossible to be brought back because no one will buy that product even in the United States anymore. So they know that it is not possible, but they go after that promise election campaign after election campaign. Or for example, the legend about Chinese tariffs. Who paid the Chinese tariffs that Trump introduced and Biden didn't give up? American consumers paid it because the producers just corrected the prices. They are not going to reduce the wages that are miserable anyway. Or for example, long supply chains of labor shortage, etc., etc. So these are all totally, I mean, how to say, these are unobjective reporting. And then, of course, when you have some sort of confusion on a daily basis, then you, I mean, for a man that has maybe 1 hour a day to dedicate to news, it's easier to give it up and to believe that there is a conspiracy or like a setup of everything. And it's really not hard to fall prey to most bizarre narrative, you know. If you are desperate, if you don't have like enough patience to go into every detail, as Tamara said, to check the source, and all the campaigns here that are active in the field are like check the source twice, see if these scientists are having proper, you know, like titles. And last time when I did it, my relative tried to pursue me that evolution, Darwin's theory is not valid anymore, and that professor of biology from Toronto University of Serbian origin claims it publicly. And I said, check him he cannot be professor in university in Toronto. He must be fake. But no, he is professor of biology in university, in a proper university in Canada, not some bizarre, fake university. But he insists that when he talks about against the evolutionary theory, that he speaks as a private person. Like when he is professor of biology, he respects the theory. When he is in private, and this private had 100,000 views in Serbia only in YouTube, And then the story about titles, about the real professorship is also, how to say, at least shaken, Okay, yeah. Sorry to hear that, Vuk. I hope you join us. We are continuing to with a good topic related to today's in the project itself. We are continuing with Orwell analysis of Orwell 1984, and let's hope that we will not witness dystopias that we did analysis. That we did analyze in our reading group. Okay, Melisa, please. I saw your comment. I know that yeah, you're thanking everyone. Please, Melisa, give us a few more words. I mean, we were quite a demanding classroom. I don't know how your students react to this type of very, I mean, your lecture was condensed, but very clear. I mean, I'm really impressed that you managed to, to present so many important theses and topics in such a, to say, user-friendly way. I'm really, impressed. I don't know. I mean, yeah. Tamara already asked you the right questions, but I will ask this one for the end. What would be your advice to indie media enthusiasts and like all of us that expected so much in year of 2000, when we believe that digital participation will improve democracy? Now, with this knowledge, what would be your advice to them then?
Start something new. Start something new. Yeah. Regulate Facebook.
It didn't exist. No, in 2000 it did exist.
No, nothing. Nothing existed. None of them. And remember, that's why it was such a miracle that they were able to do what they did. Is none of those platforms existed. I just want to finish up by saying thank you to everybody who came, and especially tomorrow. I'm looking forward, hopefully, to get to meet you when we're there and hear about your work. And we're building the site, and we're building these interventions, these very user-friendly interventions. If anyone wants to try them out, we would love to talk about that. And then we'll be doing additional work once we get there and get kind of inspired by the situation on the ground. So that's it. That's all we got. I think we're done. Yeah. Yes, we are done. Just to repeat for the ones that connected later, we will have Melisa and Bronwyn Molden, who is here only in the audience, being quiet and not asking questions. Okay, they will come. They will come on November 10th to Belgrade. They will spend 10 days here. We will have a public program, at least one. But the point is, as you've heard, probably if you caught the end of the lecture and in this debate, what is about to be, what is next? To answer Tamara's question, is the next Institute for Conspiracy Theories Analysis, and that will hopefully through artistic and also theoretical and educative and activist participation
offer us some sort of a platform, for sure international, I hope, to cope with the phenomenon and to productively resisting and maybe reorient it. You know, being skeptical is important part of civilian consciousness. You know, being skeptical about everything. But like when this skepticism is taken over in a totally problematic direction, then this is two problems there. First, to redirect it, and then to keep this skepticism alive. You know, not like that's I hope that's possible. Okay. If no one has any short comment on question, we will end this presentation and meet Melisa and Bronwyn in between 10 and 20th November. Somewhere here we will see, it depends on possible lockdown or pandemic measures, but we will have opportunity to talk with them, to share experiences, to have a tours of Belgrade that you can join, and to help them to maybe also share their experience and activist methodology in our setting. Yeah, that's the point.
All right.
Okay, thank you all once again. Look, all the best for your recovery. Stay safe. Hope to see you soon online.
Bye.
All the best to everybody. Thank you once again, Melisa, for wonderful presentation and
Thank you.
patience. And see you soon. See you
See
soon.
you soon.
Belgrade.